Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining for the final conference of this project, PERHOUSE. Before we start, we will start in a minute. I would like to give you some instructions or to have a smooth webinar. So first of all, I would like to inform you that this webinar will be recorded and available in ESPD social media channels. Specifically, we are live in ESPD Facebook. Your microphone will be muted to ensure the quality of the session. For any questions you might have, please use the Q&A option that you can find on the bottom. And if you wish to share any comments, please use the chat box. Captioning is available, and for that, I will ask you to click on the bottom in the option that it says transcription. Once you click there, you will see the option to translate the language you are speaking or the language you are listening. Translation is also available in Czech, Polish, Slovenian, and Slovak. And to activate this tool, please go to the interpretation button on the Zoom panel at the bottom and select the language you wish to know the translation. To have a better interpretation, we kindly ask you to mute the original audio. Please, if you have any questions, use the Q&A option. And thank you so much for joining again. We will start the webinar in a minute.
Hey, hello everybody to the final conference of the PERHOUSE project. I am Thomas Bignell, Secretary General of the European Association of Service Providers for Persons with Disabilities. So welcome this morning, and thank you, Angela, for giving the, let's say, technical remarks around accessibility. So let's start with a brief, let's say, more political overview of the situation before we go more in depth into the project itself. It's clear more and more that people want to receive services in their homes. When it comes to care services, people want to stay at home as long as possible. And to do that, you need to receive care at home. People also need help and support because very often they're busy, for example, at work, to have cleaning services or other types of services at home too. So all in all, people want to receive more and more of their services in their own homes. This responds to modern economic needs, employment needs, social needs, and so forth. The main issue is that the system is not set up yet sufficiently to cater for support and services to be done in people's homes. You have significant amounts of non-declared work and throughout Europe. The social protection systems, in particular for workers, are also not in place. There's very little legislation that, for example, can control quality services in people's homes as well. A lot of attention has been given to the development of these services, these PHS services, in particular in Western Europe, for example, through voucher systems, family employment systems, social dialogue, and so forth. But very, very, very little attention has been given to how these services are being developed in Central and Eastern Europe. And this is exactly what the PERHOUSE project aims to solve, aims to look into, is how can we develop good quality PHS services, well-regulated, well-controlled, well-financed, with good working conditions in Central and Eastern Europe. So that's just a general introduction to this project. Let's say the political purpose behind the project, and now we will go into the depth of it. And I will, I think, pass the floor to the person who will be in charge of presenting the PERHOUSE in depth. So thank you very much, everybody, and see you later.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this conference. My name is Marta Kahancová. I'm the Managing Director of CELSI, the Central European Labour Studies Institute, based in Bratislava, Slovakia, and it was the honor for our institute to coordinate the PERHOUSE project. I would especially like to thank Barbara Holubová, the lead researcher, and the entire consortium for doing a great job. As we already heard, the project addresses a very relevant topic. The care sector is really very omnipresent at the level of EU level policies. It addresses critical issues of social inclusion, gender equality, economic growth and adequate support for this type of service in the society. However, there is a gap in knowledge and a large difference considering the national situations, regulations, and a lack of unified framework for addressing this issue at the EU level. So that's why the PERHOUSE project was very timely and brought some new evidence that you will be introduced to today. As Chelsea, as the lead of the project, the PERHOUSE project fits very well into our mission. And we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Chelsea is an independent research institute where we try to collect data, to do research, to provide robust evidence for policymaking, and also enable talent development in the area of labor studies. And one of the most developed and most active research areas at Chelsea is the so-called caring societies research area coordinated by Barbara Holubova. Here, the research includes exploration on care work, reproductive work, working conditions in sectors dominated by women, the questions related to unpaid work and undeclared work. And this research area is closely connected also with one of our other strong research areas, which is social dialogue and collective bargaining. And the PERHOUSE project succeeded in bridging these two research areas. And this is especially relevant because earlier research has focused mostly on residential care services and the analysis of the provision of institutionalized care and working conditions in the organized care sector, while the PERHOUSE project reacts to increasing importance of policies that aim at deinstitutionalizing care, especially elderly care, and also policies related in general to work-life balance and the support to social rights, to reduce gender pay gap in employment. And this is a very important topic, especially in Central and Eastern Europe. As we have heard already this morning, there is a lack of knowledge on how the institutionalization of care services, the access to care services, and the provision of these services is happening in this region. We can go to the next slide, please. So today we will walk you through some of the findings. There are many findings from the project, national findings, EU level analysis, country videos. The team has organized very constructive national workshops. So you will be introduced to some of these key findings that were also based on a very rich methodological approach. The team has implemented 2 online surveys. They have done interviews both with national and EU level stakeholders, focus group interviews with domestic workers in a number of countries. And what the project especially benefited from was the commitment and the advisory role of EU level social partners in personal and household services. And here I would like to thank the partners for being very active and very supportive and very constructive in implementing this project. We would start the conference with a video where you would be able to hear some of the most important findings. And after the video, the program will include various discussions on the relevance of personal and household services. So I wish you a dynamic and very constructive discussion. And now we are up for the video. Thank you.
Personal and household services, PHS, are essential for the well-being of families and individuals. These services, including childcare, elderly care, cleaning, home repairs, and ICT support transform households into workplaces, enhancing daily life and societal functioning. Despite their importance, the PHS sector faces poor working conditions and undervalued work, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, where weak regulations and ineffective industrial relations hinder progress. To improve this situation, the PERHOUSE project, funded by the European Union, explores industrial relations to enhance working conditions and services in PHS across 12 Central and Eastern European countries: Bulgaria, Croatia, Czechia, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, North Macedonia, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia. 6 project partners participated in PERHOUSE to address key research questions about the current state of PHS in CEE countries and the role of social dialogue in regulating and improving work patterns in this sector. The findings show that the PHS sector in CEE countries is diverse, with many informal jobs and a high share of female workers. Due to demographic shifts, demand for childcare and elderly care is rising. Family members provide a significant share of these services, and in some countries, the government provides subsidies for their household work. However, PHS workers face challenges related to professionalization, access to training and certification, and insufficient state regulation. An online survey on the demand for PHS in 12 CEE countries revealed that 76% of respondents used at least one PHS service in the last 5 years, mainly for small repairs and housekeeping. Time constraints and lack of skills were the main reasons for purchasing these services. Conversely, reasons for not purchasing PHS services included a preference for personal handling of home and family care, affordability, and lack of trust in strangers delivering the service. The survey also shows that people would be more encouraged to use PHS services if the service was of high quality and professional. Demand for PHS is thus driven by more factors than low prices or state subsidies. Furthermore, national social partners and other actors have identified challenges affecting the quality of PHS in Central and Eastern European countries. These include low public service investment, lack of social dialogue, low wages, and workforce shortages. To address these issues, national stakeholders from 12 CEE countries suggest improving regulation, ensuring compliance with standards, and subsidizing services to increase availability for those in need. Improvements in social dialogue in the PHS sector are also recommended. Detailed analyses in Czechia, Slovenia, Estonia, Poland, North Macedonia, and Slovakia revealed common challenges. Underdeveloped social dialogue frameworks impact the effectiveness of worker representation and negotiations. Disparities exist between the public and private sectors, with public sector workers generally better represented in social dialogue. There is a significant lack of trade union representation, especially in personal assistance and non-care services. Low union participation and weak collective bargaining power are prevalent in all studied countries. High levels of informality hinder systematic social dialogue, professionalization of workers, and protection of their rights. Governments and employers in some countries resist engaging in social dialogue, particularly in negotiating sector-wide improvements in working conditions. Based on collected data, including interviews and focus groups, the project partners suggest the following policy recommendations. In Czechia, formalizing informal PHS work arrangements is recommended. Slovenia might expand public PHS services to address undeclared work, strengthen trade union representation in privately provided services, and improve working conditions. Estonia might establish an organization for family caregivers, provide state-sponsored training, and ensure balanced social dialogue. For Poland, the consortium recommends simplifying the contractual rules, modernizing labor market institutions, and enhancing social dialogue to improve the conditions of PHS workers. Next to increased public service investments, North Macedonia requires targeted policies to address sector-specific challenges, such as the care drain due to demographic changes. Slovakia should expand training capacities for care workers and create a registry of professional carers to advance their professionalization and tackle unfair competition from undeclared workers. For more information, visit the project website.
Thank you, Marta, for your presentation. And also, I can assure you that this video is a great example of the hard work of all the partners doing our research on the current state of the PH sector in these 12 CE countries along these months of the project. Now we are moving to analyze the European state of play and stakeholder view on the PH sector. And for that, I would like to present you Magdalena Zaglok-Jelek. She is PhD in economics, and she is part of the Enforcement and Analysis Unit of the European Labour Authority. She will be explaining us the involvement of the European Labour Authority in the PH sector and the future plans to address the undeclared worker in the sector. So please, Magdalena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Angela. Good morning, everybody. My name is Magdalena Zaglok-Jelek. As Angela mentioned, I work at the European Labour Authority at Enforcement and Analysis Unit in the Analysis and Risk Assessment sector. I would like to thank you, the Celsi Institute and EASPD, for giving me the floor today. Ensuring fair working conditions and cross-border labor mobility lie among the main objectives of ELA, along with facilitating the member states better tackle undeclared work. Today, I am happy to speak and share an overview of insights on ELA's work and supporting activities and publications in the area of PHS. As you can see on the slide, well, I would like to start with mentioning a seminar that ELA organized and chaired in March 2022 on tackling undeclared work in the care and personal and household services. It was organized by the European Platform for Tackling Undeclared Work, which is a permanent working group at the Enforcement and Analysis Unit at ELA. The event brought together 68 participants. The seminar looked at existing practices, tools, and approaches that deal with undeclared work in the care and personal and household services sector. The seminar provided participants with an opportunity to explore how difficult challenges could be overcome. It provided a review of the deterrence of development and trends on undeclared work in the care and personal household services sector, finally focused on deterrence and preventative approaches and coordinated cross-agency operations targeted at the care and personal and household services sector. Next slide, please. In line with the study that was also published by ELA as an outcome of the seminar, according to the main findings, there were around 18 million declared and undeclared workers in this sector in the European Union in 2020. The share of undeclared work is slightly over 50% on average in the EU. It is a bit lower in the care sector at 34% and higher in direct household employment, about 70%. The share of undeclared work varies across EU, EEA countries, depending on the country's specific institutional regime of providing care and other household services. The most prevalent form of undeclared work in the PHS sector is unregistered employment, especially in countries where households directly employ PHS workers. Overall, in the EU, there is an increasing demand for PHS work. It was also mentioned at the video. This is driven by the aging and longer life expectancy. As I mentioned, the seminar focused also on deterrence measures that in general are less applicable in the PHS sector than preventative approaches. Collaboration between social partners in the care and PHS sector is based on the common interest to regulate compliance and set a level playing field for employers. Next slide, please. In the area of deterrence, I wanted to mention that access to private households is the main challenge to inspections. Only in Ireland, home inspection was possible under specific preconditions, usually combined with preventive measures. In Norway, likewise in Norway, in Spain, labor inspectors can carry out inspections in the premises of companies which employ PHS workers. Care and PHS undeclared work also has a cross-border dimension. To tackle this, some countries have set up a bilateral cooperation to detect fraudulent temporary employment agencies. A considerable challenge for all member states in identifying fraudulent practices regards temporary employment agencies registered outside the EU and also when a worker is a third country national. A common deterrence practice among enforcement authorities is to cross-check the information. In the area of prevention, professionalization, like granting to PHS sector workers equal employment and social protection rights as standard workers, as well as recognizing households as a workplace, the key to shift undeclared to declared work in the PHS sector. Awareness-raising campaigns and education targeting employers, workers, and consumers can play a role in tackling undeclared work in the care and PHS sector. Social partners can play an important role as well. For instance, they can provide an up-to-date knowledge of the sector, and labor inspectorates can carry out inspections accordingly. The most frequently used preventative measures are social vouchers, targeted indirect or direct taxes, and simplified compliance. Next slide, please. On this slide, I'd like to focus on key learnings and suggestions to address undeclared work in the current PHS sector at national and EU level that resulted from the ELA study. Currently, there is no standard definition of households as a workplace. Adopting a common definition would be instrumental in recognizing the status of individuals operating in services in households. A holistic approach is needed to tackle undeclared work in the care and PHS sector. Political will could improve the cooperation between labor inspectorates, social partners, and other stakeholders, and can increase the role of all stakeholders. Authorities need to develop training and education activities for labor inspectorates focused on the care and PHS sector. There is also, of course, a role for ELA. ELA can provide practical support for increasing knowledge and skills of labor inspectorates, also by focusing on cross-border labor mobility, supporting member states to engage in staff exchanges, or carry out concerted and joint inspections in the sector. The platform for tackling undeclared work has the potential to support national authorities in tackling undeclared work in the PHS sectors by disseminating good practices, such as successful preventative measures like social vouchers. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the study published by ELA in March 2022 on tackling undeclared work in the personal and household sector. Here you can see on this slide the main areas of the study, the outline of the study. Next slide, please. Apart from the report, the ELA also, the platform specifically, has also published several practice pieces. Few of them refer to good practices for tackling undeclared work in the PHS sectors. Here on the slide, we mention 3 of them. There are hyperlinks on the slide, so you can download and click on them to find out more. Next slide, please. Regarding future activities of ELA in this area of personal care and personal and household services sector, I would like to mention that ELA plans to launch a report on the care sector in 2026. The work, of course, will start earlier than that, probably end of this year already. The intention of ELA is to bring the study close to core activities of ELA, like problems with enforcement of labor mobility rules and social security coordination rules. And this is the end of my intervention. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Magdalena, for your presentation. Now we are moving to the next speakers. And for that, I would like to present you to Petra Etzetlin. And she is a PhD in Charles University in Prague. And she is the author of one of the project results, which is the EU-level report. Also, another author is Olga Georgiev, but I don't think she's here. But she has contributed a lot to this report, and I would like also to mention her. After the presentation of Petra, we have the honor to count with the Professor Eleanor Kaufman. She is professor in the University of Middlesex, and she has been providing some comments to this report. And yeah, we have the honor to have her today with us. And please, Petra, the floor is yours.
Good morning from Prague. I would like to just apologize that Olga is absent today due to her health conditions. So what we try to do or what we did in our EU level report, we try to look how regional specific of PHS in the CE region was reflected in relevant policy documents and by EU stakeholders. We also look on their strategies of advocacy, on the problems of those related to PHS at the EU level. Also, we try to look on communication and cooperation with regional and national partners in the region. And also we had a specific focus on two contemporary care crises aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine, which obviously shifted the PHS agenda at EU level and in the CE region. The specific focus we had also on European care strategy, and we try to look on that again from the regional perspective. Concerning methods, we try to combine policy analysis of EU level documents, and also we did 8 semi-structured interviews with selected EU stakeholders. Next slide, please. So what we found, I would like to point out that the main reasons for the specific invisibility of the region, which was already mentioned here today, in establishing social dialogue in the PHS sector, the framing of PHS at the EU level is largely informed by national economies, demographics, and social history of Western European member states. When providing arguments for the development of the sector, EU stakeholders largely draw on examples of supporting public policies in the form of social and tax incentives, as well as experimentation with vouchers, primarily from Western Europe. As such, limited consideration is generally given to regional disparities and differences between national contexts beyond such member states. In policy documents, CE regions are rarely addressed beyond the quality of their countries of origin. Empirical data on PHS sector in CE countries remains scarce, making it difficult to conclude whether the drivers of PHS are consistent across all EU countries. Factors such as increasing income, greater labor market participation, particularly by women, structural inequalities, a rising number of single-parent families or bi-active families, and public support for the offer or demand at the labor market may vary across countries. The recent effort to remedy the missing data is the PHS Employment Monitor. The survey covers workers in PHS, jointly commissioned by the social partners, the European Trade Union Federations, Europe, and EFAT, and the employers' organizations, EFE and EFSI, collected responses from more than 6,500 PHS workers, employers, and service users from 26 countries. What is important for us that the survey covered also selected CE countries: Slovakia, Slovenia, Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania, Latvia, and Croatia. The results point to a persistent and serious crisis of labor shortages and turnover in a sector that is estimated to account for 4% of total employment in EU. I'm quoting the report. Workers, employers, and service users or user employers consider the sector to be undervaluated, both in terms of perception, which is a really big problem in the region, remuneration, and public funding. Next slide, please. Moreover, the PHS agenda is conceptualized in transnational manner, what we found in our policy analysis and also in interviews with stakeholders, and therefore does not account for regional specifics, including CE. The development of the PHS agenda and the voice of the region depend on active participation on European platforms. In interviews, EU stakeholders reflected on certain passivity of some national stakeholders. On the other hand, also European stakeholders lack CE experts from the region, which results in a lack of active inclusion of the regional perspective in their agendas. An alarming fact in the region is that not a single CE country has ratified ILO Convention on Domestic Work number 189. It's important to mention here that EFSI initiated the European Multi-Stakeholder Conference in 2021 to mark the 10th anniversary of the ILO Domestic Work Convention, and it included active participation of experts and stakeholders from Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Croatia. Interviews with selected EU stakeholders highlighted the negative situation and reflected on the possible reasons for the failure of the ratification process in the region. Some stakeholders argued that the ILO Convention, quoting, is not a perfect document as it excludes self-employed workers, the end of quotation, and that this is a type of work, along with undeclared work, is a predominant in the region. During interviews, stakeholders reflected on national actors who argue that the ratification of the convention is redundant because their existing legislation already covers this type of protection through other national regulations. The CE region is perceived only as a sending region rather than a receiving region for female migrant care workers from Ukraine, who often work in undeclared jobs in PHS sector. In our interview analysis, we also focus on the situation caused by the war in Ukraine and the feminized migration from Ukraine to CE countries, where this region, mostly Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, receive high proportion of refugees. However, our interviews revealed that even the fact does not imply a significant turn of attention to this region in PHS agenda. In a position paper published by EFSI in June 2020, PHS support for Ukrainian refugees, integration provides EFSI a strong position in supporting Ukrainian refugees in PHS sector. Quoting, EFSI and its members are fully committed to welcome the people from Ukraine in the sector, the end of quotation. We have observed concrete aftershocks of Ukrainian integrations into the PHS sector, for example, in Belgium, in their voucher system, or in France and Italy. However, similar activities have been lacking in the PHS sector in the CE region. Although the CE region is identified as a sending region for intra-EU migrant live-in care workers, their situation is not sufficiently addressed in the PHS agenda at the EU level. European care strategy fails to recognize the care work migration has evolved into a specifically intra-European phenomenon, exacerbating the care shortage in CE countries and contributing to regional inequalities along the East-West axis. In this regard, notwithstanding the specific issues faced by cross-border domestic workers working as posted workers, the European Care Strategy does not indicate the specific measures at the EU level for intra-EU migrant domestic workers, the majority of whom originate from CE countries. In contrast, to improve the working conditions of intra-EU migrant domestic workers and avoid social dumping, it should promote development of a common legal framework for regulating the cross-border intra-EU provision of live-in care work. Next slide. Based on our report findings, we propose the following recommendations to raise the profile of PHS agenda in CE. We suggest to enhance the expert knowledge on PHS in the CE region. The PHS agenda should have a regional focus and use local knowledge on the ground. Given the lack of information, there is a need to support the production of necessary analytical material, meaning also research material, to deepen the knowledge of the region. We also suggest to raise awareness of the PHS sector in CE. The social awareness of the specifics of the PHS sector in the region is very low. It is necessary to support it among national stakeholders and the public in the form of social campaigns, professional workshops, and by sharing good practices from countries where the PHS sector is already more developed, formalized, and regulated. And we've seen great campaigns done by Uni Europe, for example, during the COVID-19 also distributed in the region. We suggest to intensify the support for the ratification of the ILO Convention on Domestic Work, number 189, in CE countries as an important instrument to recognize the rights of domestic workers. We also suggest to revise the European Care Strategy in order to reflect and incorporate the specificities of the PHS sector. This should be done on the basis of expert comments from stakeholders in the PHS sector. For example, the main concern revolves around the distinction between domestic long-term care workers, home care workers, and other domestic workers, which according to EFAT would have major implication for already highly vulnerable groups of essential workers, for example, those undeclared workers or undocumented migrants. We would like to also continue to bring attention of experts to working conditions of EU live-in care workers, those cross-border care workers from Central and Eastern European countries, and also develop more effective monitoring of the situation of working conditions of Ukrainian refugees in the PHS sector in CE countries. Furthermore, we suggest to continue to strengthen the expertise of social partners in designing and implementing social dialogue at the European and national levels in CE countries in the PHS sector through national social dialogue initiatives. Relevant European stakeholders and institutions should continue, they already started, but they should continue to identify and address CE regional partners, use the potential of already existing and raising grassroots movements in PHS, and effectively use of the social media communication platforms of PHS workers for information, dissemination, and social dialogue mobilization to share information campaigns, organize discussions, or provide online legal consultancy. The main PHS stakeholders such as EFAT, EFA, EFSI, and Uni Europa recognize each other as partners, what our policy analysis is really proving, as a potential partners for social dialogue at the EU level. They continue to work in collaboration with a strong focus on combating undeclared work through professionalization and formalization of working standards and integrating migrant workers in sustainable manner. Important activity is the PHS Dialogue project, which has the ambition not only to monitor the situation of PHS workers, but also to establish sectoral observation at the national level, including selected CE countries. Just to conclude, while transnational cooperation in the establishment of pan-European platform for the development of PHS has registered significant progress over years, national actors and social dialogue grounded in the CEE region remains underrepresented at the European level due to the both underdeveloped or isolated local capacities as well as persistent regional differences. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Petra. It's a great report, and then we can see the starting point of all that needs to be done in the PH sector. Professor Kaufman, would you like to provide us some comments?
Thank you very much. I don't know that I can add a lot to this excellent report because it's a really important study. As Petra has said, the study is attempting to rectify the invisibility of care workers in the CEE because so much attention has over the years been paid to Western Europe, and the CEE has simply been seen as a supplier of labor to Western Europe. And I think what this report is trying to do is that it's redirecting the attention away to some extent, firstly, from Western Europe, and to say that it's really important that we need to study these issues in the CEE, and there may be specificities in the CEE, in particular, not just in relation to the nature of the labor force, but also to the kind of the lack of social dialogue, which is also trailing behind where we are so far in Western Europe. So I think that this is an extremely important report, which one hopes will shift the both the research, but particularly the practical implementation of a social dialogue forward. I think what was also very interesting in the report was disaggregating, of course, the care sector into the different kinds of services. So in terms of the care services themselves, in relation to those services which provide support in the household. And I think most of the discussion is fundamentally about the care service, the care sector in a narrow sense, I think more, because this is the area where we've been talking about a crisis in the sector. And I think, as Petra has mentioned already, the fact that wages are very low, that the working conditions are often extremely exploitative and difficult, that we have major problems with turnover. And if you think about the increasing elderly population, this will become more and more an issue. And also, I thought what was very interesting here, because it's worth following up in terms of where the interventions have to occur, is that, as they've shown, 70% of the PHS workers are hired through the provider model, which means basically through a third party, as opposed to the third or 30% who are hired directly. And it's this 30% where we've got the very large amount of undeclared work, and where you don't have necessarily a third party intervention. And therefore you calling upon more authorities like the European Labour Authority or state authorities particularly, which is also something that this report has called for, is a greater intervention by the state. Now, coming on to one of the suggestions that the report makes is that because none of the states in CEE have actually signed the ILO convention, this should be a priority. But I'd like us to stand back a little bit, because there are a number of EU states that have signed the convention, and you really want to ask yourself to what difference has it actually made, and what are still the problems that we face, even when a state signs the ILO convention. Because one of the big issues also is the way that the household has been looked at as a place of work, which I think is very important. All feminist work has argued that the household is a key place of work. But in order to really do something about particular sector of direct of employment with an employee, with an employer who's a household employer, the question then is, whether you can have any kinds of investigations into households that do not comply with regulations. And in Ireland, this has been an issue about whether inspectors can enter into the household. So I'm just saying that the suggestion that the ILO convention should be signed, yes, it should be done. But I think we need to be realistic about what it will do. And it varies between sectors, because we also know that where a labor force is heavily migrant, this is often the case that that much less attention is paid to the working conditions where it's a migrant labor force. And as we know, this is not exclusively, and I think we need to be aware of that there's a bit of an exaggeration of the extent to which this is a migrant labor force. But nevertheless, there are a large number of migrants in this labor force. And I think this has been obviously, I would say a lot of the research in Western Europe has often focused on migrants in the labor force. And I think we need also to look at non-migrant workers in the labor force. They're also important and we shouldn't forget them. I thought also that, again, what was very enlightening here was the comparison or the review of the evolution of an understanding of this sector, and hopefully the preparedness to continue changing is the evolving attitudes and interventions of different stakeholders, whether it be FE or an FAT or trade unions, which in the past didn't take this at all very seriously, but I think are increasingly beginning to take it seriously. And I think this is extremely important, because what we have seen, thankfully, is that the EU's care strategy is taking it in a social direction rather than a direction just looking at how many people are employed. And the social direction is really important, because we need to push to a fair working conditions, to social rights, to simply treating household workers equally with non-household workers. And this has been really the fundamental lamentable situation, I think, of this sector, of the differential treatment. And I think the two reasons for that differential treatment is, one is, as you note, it's a largely female labor force. And secondly, it's become, in the last 20 years, an increasingly migrant labor force. And these two compositions are often not taken very seriously. I think another very valuable contribution has been bringing up to date the impact of two key developments. One has been the COVID and the impact of COVID, which was huge in this sector, because many workers simply lost their jobs here or were stranded in the household, whichever. And secondly, again, something that, because of the continuing war in Ukraine, we have a major issue again with, particularly again in the CEE, with Ukrainian migrant workers who, and again, we know that Ukrainian refugees have been heavily feminized. So I think this is really very, a current discussions here. So I just want to end by saying this is a really excellent report and it should be heavily welcomed. And I hope that the report can feed into, as you asked for, a revision of the care strategy. I hope that there will be greater collaboration, which is already happening, but it can continue between the employers' federations, trade unions, and the EU, for example, European Labour Authority, because I think we will only kind of push forward this social dialogue, which I think is so important in this sector, if it's this collaboration across the different actors in the center. So I just want to finally say congratulations on a really excellent report. And we'll hear after the break, you could say, or in the next section, different specific reports on the situation in the CEE. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kaufmans. Thank you for your comments and for your intervention during our project. It's really nice to have you, and we are pleased to have you. Now we have a few minutes for some questions, and the floor is open to all those participants who wish to ask any questions to either Petra on the EU level report or to Magdalena on their involvement in the PH sector on her presentation she did. So do you have any questions? We see that Daniela Pohibova has raised her hand. You can talk and ask the question directly.
There.
Not sure if she can unmute herself.
Yes, she can, yes. However, she's...
Dobre, už počujete ma? Dobre, ďakujem. Tak ešte raz, že u nás tá práca v domácnosti ešte není až tak rozvinutá, že stále u nás viac menej tá starostlivosť sa poskytuje v pobytových zariadeniach, alebo v týždenných zariadeniach, alebo v denných stacionároch. Väčšinou, pokiaľ je to domáca starostlivosť, tak sú to rodinní príslušníci, že dajme tomu manželka, alebo o rodičov sa deti starajú. A v podstate u nás iba Združenie miest a obcí, čiže obce a mestá, majú ako v pracovnom pobere tieto opatrovateľky, dá sa povedať, ktoré poskytujú tú starostlivosť v domácnostiach. A za to som tak začala zo široka, lebo tam hovoríte o tých kontrolách. Tak v podstate áno, je pravda, že sú veľmi nízko ohodnotené, ale máme zabezpečenú kontrolu, by som povedala, legislatívne to máme dosť dobre ošetrené. Otázka je, ako sa to využíva. Že napríklad máme ako zákon o inšpekcii v sociálnych veciach, to je pod gesciou Ministerstva práce a sociálnych vecí a rodiny, ktorí vykonávajú kontroly u neverejných aj verejných poskytovateľov, teda tých pobytových. A potom my v podstate, pokiaľ je to v domácnosti, tak máme úrady práce a sociálnych vecí. A práve tí pracovníčky alebo pracovníci tých sociálnych vecí chodia robiť kontroly do tých domácností, za akých podmienok, teda či už tí klienti alebo tí, čo sa o nich starajú, tam pracujú. A pokiaľ ste hovorili o tých inšpektoroch práce, by som povedala, u nás ani nie tak inšpektori práce, ale my máme primárnu preventívnu starostlivosť, ktorú zabezpečujú orgány verejného zdravotníctva. A oni v podstate dozorujú, v akých podmienkach sa robia, aké sú tam zdravotné rizika, choroby z povolania, v akých podmienkach žijú, či už sú to tí klienti, alebo aj ako pracujú tí, ktorí sa o nich starajú. Takže ja som to len ako chcela na doplnenie, že v podstate u nás je to takýmto spôsobom, aj ten dozor, aj to poskytovanie tej starostlivosti. Ďakujem.
Thank you very much. It was, I think, reaction more to European Labour Authority's presentation. If I just can take a word to react on Eleanor, I fully agree on your concerns about ILO convention, of course, but I still think that this kind of symbolic recognition is super important, especially in our countries where you have heard that it's mostly unpaid female kind of work, and of course it's causing a lot of problems. But also, I think it has to be what we see now in the field. That's it's really strong instruments are legal cases on the courts. For example, in case of Germany, we are observing the case of Dobrina, Bulgarian posted workers. She really was. She put her case on the court, and we see that this kind of legal cases could be even more effective than ILO convention, because Germany has ratified ILO convention. So I fully agree on that. I have one question here concerning Ukrainian refugees. that there is a question if they are all also working in a sea households. Yes, they've been even before the war. It was a part of my previous research in Czech Republic, for example, or in Poland, but there are really, the domestic work became to be a part of humanitarian arena during the war. So in terms even of solidarity households hosting Ukrainian family refugees, they had to negotiate what is a reproductive work, what is a solidarity, and what seems to be really something what we can say it's PHS, it's paid work. So yeah.
Thank you, Petra. We have one last question, and this is for Magdalena. One of the recommendations was to establish a private household as a workplace. Do you think that this could increase the labor authorities' deterrent activities to prevent UDWV in PHS?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, well, so indeed, well, this was one of the recommendations that establishing a workplace as a household, as a private household, as a workplace could be a good way forward. But well, it is also widely recognized that you know, it is quite hard. Even this step is not well that easy to implement across all EU member states due to different regulations. This is not very easy to be done, I would say, and I wouldn't say also that, well, this is probably one really necessary step that will take some time and need some regulation on the EU level, but it's only one of the actions that could be taken. And I would also say that probably we should more focus on preventative approaches than really deterrence measures. This was also commented to, you know, this was also a recommendation from the employer and social partners to after Ella's workshop that took place 2 years ago. So, well, there is much to be done, and as other initiatives were also mentioned during the presentation by Petra, Professor Hoffman also mentioned some important points, critical points that calls for action, like high share of female workers, migrants, that are of course vulnerable groups. Yeah, so of course, as Ella, we are also providing studies we are also focusing on the vulnerable groups in not only in the PHS and care sector, but now we are working on the hotels, catering, and restaurant sector. So also by Ella's mandate, we are always very much focused on the vulnerable groups. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add also one more point to Eleanor's review of our report. She really mentioned really important thing that also women from a major society or ethnic women are part of the PHS sector. And what we are observing here, for example, in the Czech Republic, due to as an answer to care crisis caused by demographic change, commodification, and financialization of care market already is also happening in Central and Eastern Europe. We have big corporate players involved. Is the rise of 24-hour service for the senior care done by women from major society who previously worked as migrant care workers in Germany or in Austria. So this is really interesting development, and I think yes, we have to take attention on what's happening in our countries as a response to commodification and financialization of especially senior care.
Thank you, Petra, and thank you, Magdalena, for answering the questions. Indeed, as you have mentioned, there's still a lot to do on undeclared work on the PH sector, but I think that this is a great starting point, and the research should continue its collaborations, and we will see the results in the future. Thank you everyone for your attention during this first part of the event. Now we are going to give you a few minutes of break. I kindly ask you to come back at 10:45, so in 15 minutes. Nevertheless, during the break, we are gonna get profit and show you some of the national videos which summarize the national reports that our project partners have developed as a project results. They are the videos of North Macedonia and Slovenia. Thank you so much and see you in 15 minutes.
Добре дојдовте на прегледот на проектот PERHOUSE, финансиран од Европската Унија. Ова иницијатива е посветена на подобрување на работните услови и услугите во секторот на лични услуги и услуги за домакинствата низ Централна и Источна Европа, вклучувајќи и Северна Македонија. Со фокус на овој сектор, проектот има за цел да се справи со клучните прашања кои влијаат на работната сила и на квалитетот на услугите што се обезбедува. Добре дојдовте на прегледот на проектот PERHOUSE, финансиран од Европската Унија. Ова иницијатива е посветена на подобрување на работните услови и услугите во секторот на лични услуги и услуги за домакинствата низ Централна и Источна Европа, вклучувајќи и Северна Македонија. Со фокус на овој сектор, проектот има за цел да се справи со клучните прашања кои влијаат на работната сила и на квалитетот на услугите што се обезбедуваат за домакинствата. Проектот PERHOUSE има за цел да истражи и одговори на клучни истражувачки прашања. Тие вклучуваат: какви се постојните работни услови во секторот на лични услуги и услуги за домакинствата? Како можеме да го искористиме социјалниот диалог за подобрување на овие услови? И каква улога играат политиките на Европската Унија во обликувањето и подобрувањето на трудовите стандарди во овој сектор? Преку овој проект целиме да им обратиме внимание на овие критични прашања и да обезбедиме информации со политички импликации. За да ги постигнеме нашите цели, усвоивме соопфатен пристап со комбинирани методи. Ова вклучуваше обемно прегледување на литературата за да се разбере моменталната состојба, како и анкети и фокус групи за да се соберат директни информации од оние кои работат во секторот на лични услуги и услуги за домакинствата. Интервјуата со високи представници на институциите обезбедија дополнителна длабочина на нашата анализа. Оваа одбрана методологија ни овозможи да собереме и квалитативни и квантитативни податоци, обезбедувајќи целосно разбирање на динамиката на секторот. Во Македонија, секторот на лични услуги и услуги за домакинствата игра важна улога и во економијата и во општествената благосостојба. Сепак се соочува со значителни предизвици. Квалитетот на работата е силно погоден од недостигот на работна сила, предизвикан од фактори како што е феноменот одлив на грижа, каде професионалците бараат подобри можности во странство. Ова, заедно со високите нивоа на неформално вработување, резултира со несигурни работни услови. Регулаторните нејаснотии и значителните административни оптоварувања дополнително ја комплицираат ситуацијата за работодавците и вработените. Социјалниот диалог се појавува како моќен инструмент за решавање на овие предизвици. Вклучувањето на синдикати, организации на работодавци и владини тела може да поттикне подобрување во работните услови и квалитетот на услугите. Додека колективното преговарање е силно во јавниот сектор за грижа во Македонија, приватниот сектор за нега и услуги кои не нудат нега покажува значителна отсутност на синдикализација и колективни договори. Зајакнувањето на социјалниот диалог во овие области е клучно за застапување на фер трудови стандарди низ целиот сектор. Усогласувањето на трудовите практики на Северна Македонија со стандардите на Европската Унија е од суштинско значење за растот и интеграцијата на секторот. Подобрен социјален диалог не само што помага да се подобрат работните услуги во домашни услови, туку и се усогласува со директивите на ЕУ за колективно преговарање и достојни работни услови. Ово согласување го олеснува интегрирањето на Северна Македонија во пошироките европски трудови рамки, потикнувајќи подобрување во секторот на лични услуги и услуги за домакинствата, обезбедувајќи усогласеност со меѓународните трудови стандарди. За ефикасно справување со предизвиците со кои се соочува секторот на лични услуги и услуги за домакинствата и за зајакнување на социјалниот диалог, препорачуваме неколку мерки. 1. Спроведување на законски реформи за формализирање на работните односи, односно намалување на присуството на неформална работа. 2. Зајакнување на програмите за обука и професионализација за оспособување на работната сила со потребните вештини и сертификати. 3. Подобрување на механизмите за колективно преговарање, особено во приватниот сектор, за да се обезбедат фер трудови стандарди. 4. Зголемување на инвестициите во јавните услуги за грижа, за да се задоволи растечката побарувачка и да се олесни притисокот врз приватните даватели на услуги. Со преземање на овие чекори, можеме да создадеме поодржлив и праведен сектор на лични услуги и услуги за домакинствата. Наодите од проектот PERHOUSE имаат значителни импликации и за националните и за ЕУ чинителите, вклучувајќи ги политичарите, социјалните партнери и социјалните актери. Со зајакнување на силниот социјален диалог и спроведување на стратешки политики, може да обезбедиме подобра иднина за секторот на лични услуги и услуги за домакинствата во Северна Македонија и во цела Европа. Заедно можеме да направиме значителна разлика. Ви благодариме за вашето внимание.
Osebne in gospodinjske storitve predstavljajo široko paleto storitev, ki se opravljajo v gospodinjstvih in za gospodinjstva. Vključujejo skrb za starejše, invalide, varstvo otrok, čiščenje, vrtnarjenje in manjša popravila. Čeprav je sektor osebnih in gospodinjskih storitev zelo heterogen, ga zaznamujejo nizko plačilo in slabi delovni pogoji. V projektu PERHOUSE, ki ga sofinancira Evropska unija, se osredotočamo na izzive osebnih in gospodinjskih storitev v srednji in vzhodnji Evropi ter vlogo in priložnosti industrijskih odnosov za izboljšanje delovnih pogojev in kvalitete storitev v tem sektorju. Na Fakulteti za družbene vede Univerze v Ljubljani smo z uporabo anket, intervjujev in fokusnih skupin z delavkami in delavci ter z različnimi deležniki raziskali delovne pogoje in industrijske odnose v osebnih in gospodinjskih storitvah v Sloveniji. Skupne značilnosti osebnih in gospodinjskih storitev v Sloveniji so nizko plačilo, slabi delovni pogoji in feminizacija sektorja. Redna zaposlitev je najbolj razširjena pri oskrbi starejših in invalidov, medtem ko se varstvo otrok in čiščenje pogosto opravljata v nestandardnih oblikah, kot sta osebno dopolnilno delo in samozaposlovanje. Veliko je dela na črno. Pri skrbi za starejše in invalide javne službe ne pokrivajo družbenih potreb v zadostni meri, kar najbolj občutijo neplačane, neformalne oskrbovalke, zlasti ženske družinske članice. Zaradi tega se krepi delo na črno. Delo je fizično zahtevno in tvegano z vidika varnosti in zdravja. Delovni čas je pogosto nepredvidljiv, delovniki so dolgi. Varstvo otrok na domu strank se v Sloveniji izvaja v manjšem obsegu zaradi kakovostnega in dostopnega institucionalnega javnega sistema predšolske vzgoje. Prevladuje delo na črno. V segmentu podpornih storitev za gospodinjstva, kot je čiščenje domov, se storitve večinoma zagotavljajo na trgu in so dostopne predvsem ljudem z višjimi dohodki, medtem ko potrebe velikega dela prebivalstva niso zadovoljene. Glavni izzivi v osebnih in gospodinjskih storitvah vključujejo pomanjkanje javnih storitev in cenovna nedostopnost tržnih storitev, Nezadostno javno financiranje predstavlja veliko oviro pri izboljševanju delovnih pogojev in plač. Zaradi tega prihaja do pomanjkanja delovne sile, kar poslabšuje dostopnost storitev. Nizko plačilo ne omogoča preživetja, zato so delavke in delavci odvisni od drugih virov dohodka. Pomanjkanje socialne varnosti v primeru prevladujočih nestandardnih zaposlitev in dela na črno. Tveganje za zdravje in varnost delavcev, delo je fizično zahtevno, zlasti dvigovanje težkih bremen pri oskrbi odraslih. Tveganje pri čiščenju predstavljajo kemikalije in nevarnost padca z višine. Manjko usposabljanja in izobraževanja, predvsem pri samozaposlenih in prekarno zaposlenih. Glede socialnega dialoga, na področju oskrbe starejših in invalidov največji sindikat organizira vse poklice v tem segmentu. Velik izziv predstavlja odsotnost socialnega dialoga s sindikatom osebne asistence, kar ovira napredek pri izboljšanju delovnih pogojev.
Vlada zavrača pogajanja, ker formalno ni zaposlovalec. Zaposlovalci, to je izvajalci osebne asistence, pa se ne želijo pogajati, ker bi jih to omejevalo pri samovoljnem razpolaganju z delovno silo. Pri tem navajajo argument, da pogoje zaposlovanja, delovne pogoje in plače osebnih asistentov v resnici določa vlada, ne pa oni. Osebna asistenca, ki je v celoti financirana iz proračuna, je tako dejansko predana zasebnemu sektorju.
Na področju varstva otrok na domu strank sindikat daje prednost razvoju javnih vrtcev pred varstvom na domu. Zaradi majhnega števila zaposlenih v osebnih in gospodinjskih storitvah ne organizira. V segmentu podpornih storitev za gospodinjstva, kot je čiščenje, so delodajalci dobro organizirani. Zmogljivost sindikatov pa je treba ukrepiti. Večina težav na področju kakovosti in dostopnosti storitev ter plač in delovnih pogojev je povezanih s problemom neustreznega javnega financiranja. Rešitve in predlogi za odločevalce politik. Zagotavljanje javnega financiranja osebnih in gospodinjskih storitev, da bi bile storitve dostopne na univerzalni ravni ali glede na plačilno sposobnost. Reševanje vprašanja dela na črno in izboljšanje delovnih pogojev z razširitvijo zagotavljanja javno organiziranih osebnih in gospodinjskih storitev, a ne na račun institucionalne oskrbe. Zvišanje plač in izboljšanje delovnih pogojev za reševanje problema pomanjkanja delovne sile. Vključitev v obvezno dodatno pokojninsko zavarovanje na področjih z visokimi tveganji za zdravje in varnost pri delu, kot sta pomoč na domu in osebna asistenca, kar bi zaposlenim omogočilo predčasno upokojitev. Da bi se izognili odsotnosti socialnega dialoga, kot je na področju osebne asistence, ki je javno financirana in jo izvajajo neprofitne organizacije, predlagamo razširitev kolektivne pogodbe na javni sektor na vsa javno financirana delovna mesta. Na področju čiščenja domov za izboljšanje delovnih standardov in kakovosti storitev predlagamo regulacijo poklica z izobrazbenimi pogoji. Hkrati predlagamo urejanje delovnih pogojev na tem področju v kolektivni pogodbi za obrt in podjetništvo ter uporabo mehanizma razširjene veljave. Za več informacij obiščite spletno stran projekta PERHOUSE.
Okay, everybody. So I think after this break and watching these nice videos of colleagues and listening these nice South Slavic languages, I would like to welcome you at the panel discussion with the national experts. So the colleagues, researchers, which were focusing on specific countries, which we already mentioned at the beginning. So in this an hour, we are supposed to introduce you the insights from these experts into specific country studies. And we decided to take it in a form of panel discussion. So not going country by country presentation, as it might get a bit bored. So we think this form of introducing the results from the national level, already mixed views from different countries, will be interesting and bring a relevant discussion. So to open the debate, I first start with a few figures from our survey, which we run within the project and the research we conducted last 2 years. And the first graph says that the majority of people in C country using the PHS services. Yeah, so it's not a minor issue, although it's not always the care. It might be also the repairs or some sort of professional services which cannot be done by the inhabitant in the household. The demand for PHS services, it's not driven only by the low prices or the state of the subsidies in the case of C countries, but it's quality of the services, and on the other hand, it's this lack of time due to other activities. So it's exactly this care part where women are mostly exposed to this lack of time for caring for the household, kids, having a job. So this is where the recruitment of most of the workers, or the reason for the recruitment, is coming from. When looking at the social partners, because the main research question of this project was, what is the role of social dialogue, or better say, as we already know, what could be the role of social dialogue in the PHS sector in the C regions. So we looked at how social partners and social actors, because not always we can find trade unions and employers in the sector, so other actors think about, or what are the challenges for PHS sector. So in their view, it was lack of workforce, low wages and salaries, and low investments, and of course lack of representation, so the lack of the social dialogue in the sector. And in the view of the social partners, what was important to improve was the improvement of regulations and compliance, and provide subsidies of the services, and promote the professionalization of the workforce, as again already mentioned, big topic for the sector, as it runs on informal work or the undeclared work. Yeah. Right now, I would like to invite my colleagues, Anna Sadkowska from Maria Curie Skłodowska University in Poland, Branko Bembic from University of Ljubljana, Lenka Hanulova from Central European Labour Studies Institute, Jan Maso from University of Tartu in Estonia, Barbara Holubova, who also very well coordinated the project, but also conducted the Slovak study from Central European Labour Studies Institute, and then Nikita Mojsowska-Blazewski from Macedonia 2025 Institute from North Macedonia. Starting the debate, or when reading the reports from different countries, I start with you, Anna, and the Polish report, in which you highlighted that the sector is widely informal and invisible for policymakers, and so what does it imply for workers in the sector in Poland, please?
Thank you, Monica. First of all, I'd like to highlight that this is a fundamental feature of the PHS sector in Poland, that it remains with an undeclared and shadow economy, although we have the variety of the workers' situation. So there are some, actually few political instruments that would regulate the PHS sector, but majorly these regulate care services, leaving those non-care service providers without any regulation. And given that we have some regulations, still we have very low compliance with these regulations. So as I said, the fundamental feature is that the PHS workers remain without the protection of their rights. And therefore, in our report, we have highlighted that based on the interviews and focus group interviews personal household service providers reported very demanding and precarious working condition based on the 6 dimensions of job quality by Kahantsova and colleagues. So just to enumerate, low income, low job security, low social security, long working hours, slush 24 hours a day in terms of care workers, particularly live-in care workers, poor autonomy of work, particularly with reference to stress, and insufficient collective interest representation. These working conditions would vary depending on whether it's public or informal service provision. And I have to say that as far as the undeclared workers reported very poor and very precarious working conditions, there are certain problems regarding also public workers who provide care services within public care system. Also, sorry, I have like the translator jumping in, sorry. But as I was saying, we also highlighted the fact that public care workers reported deteriorating job working conditions. And in terms of private care service providers, they also reported very serious issues regarding long working conditions.
Yeah.
Excuse me for a second,
very
I have to switch off the translation because I can hear the translator in my ear. So it poses some challenge.
Sorry, Anna, if you click on the interpretation button, choose original audio, please.
Yeah,
and you
thank
will
you
no
so
longer hear
much.
the interpreter. Yes.
So speaking of this variety, depending whether it's public or private and public or undeclared, according to the data, there is lack of inspection of the working conditions due to the significant share of informal economy, and also the fact that these inspection activities are not performed in households. So it poses a challenge for the people who provide services in the households. To add on to this, we have very low level of unionization of the PHS sector. There's one trade union that's dedicated to the sector. And to add up and sum up, the situation is even worsened by the fact that these services are provided in Poland majorly by women, and also people in a difficult situations such as migrants. It has been mentioned several times that we have migrants also from Ukraine provide services. So in the case of the migrants, there is also another layer of difficulty, which is stemmed by all the formal issues regarding the legalization of stay in Poland and to receive a formal approval of their work. So just to sum up, it is a huge challenge to discuss the working conditions of the personal household service providers in Poland, especially given a very low, if not none, of the social dialogue on the issues in Poland. Thank you.
Thank you very much for pointing this out. I think this was the case also for the other countries. And my second question would go to Branko and his insight on Slovenia, because Slovenia has quite a developed sector also in terms of public services, in the PHS services and financing and providers. So, but still we can again see this division between the public and private providers. So, so what is the difference in working conditions in this case, please?
Thank you, Monica. Well, in Slovenia, of course, also it is in Poland, it is difficult to speak of a PHS sector as such, because it is very heterogeneous. However, it is apparent that both quality, accessibility, and affordability of service, as well as working conditions and industrial relations, vary along 2 dimensions. Firstly, the most important that you already mentioned is that to the extent that PHS are provided as public service, they tend to be more accessible whereas privately funded and market-provided PHS are accessible mostly to those with higher incomes, while needs of working class families, of course, go unmet. Now, as regards working conditions, a common feature is that work in the three segments of PHS that we studied, that is care for the elderly and persons with disabilities, childcare and cleaning, which are all highly feminized. They do not afford a living wage. As a rule, working conditions are better where PHS are provided as a public service, which is the case in some segments of care for elderly and persons with disabilities that also feature the largest share of workers employed in the standard forms of employment. Childcare and cleaning PHS, which are privately provided, are mostly based on precarious arrangements such as personal supplementary work, self-employment, or most commonly undeclared work. These precarious forms of employment then make for a low level of social security. Training and education are virtually absent in home cleaning, although they are regularly provided by public employers in care for elderly and persons with disabilities, with workers in childcare, also privately provided, reporting relatively strong interest in further training, which, however, they must provide by themselves. However, there are some exceptions to the rule. Workers in privately provided childcare and home cleaning report having greater control over working time than those in the area of publicly provided care for the elderly and persons with disabilities, where working time may often be unpredictable while long and unsocial working hours are common. Also, health and safety conditions appear to be most challenging in the area of care for the elderly and persons with disabilities due to the frequent lifting of heavy weights and physically demanding work. Now, the other dimension that I will only briefly mention of working condition is related to the extended members of the same household provide services. That is, precariousness increases the more PHS are provided by workers that live in the same household, such as in the case of personal assistance when provided by family members, or when paid care of family members is provided in hybrid forms of employment and also in living arrangements.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for touching up on also the topic of workers living in the same household. And maybe this is something we should still clarify a bit, that this would be falling under this informal carers group, which is also important part of the care sector, while the attention of regulation of working conditions is mostly focused, or in our project, we mostly focused on third parties coming into the household, which would be called an undeclared work. But of course, this is connected, just to clarify this terminology, the informal and the undeclared. So the similar question would go to Lenka, who studied Czech case and Czech stakeholders. That we also see in Czechia this difference between or difference in working conditions between the public-private sector and then of course this informal scale in the quality of working conditions. So can you also briefly elaborate on what type of services prevail in each of the PHS subsectors and what type of workers and in which services are the most vulnerable in your point of view or in your expertise?
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question. So, as you mentioned, there is a public subsector of PHS that is funded by the state that usually includes home healthcare services employing home nurses, home healthcare workers, and then home social care workers employing social workers and personal assistants. And then there is the private that is privately funded that usually includes activities like household maintenance, provided usually by Czech non-active workforce, migrants, informal carers, babysitting, but also on several instances, although less often, care for seniors and disabled people. And then there is the informal subsector that was widely discussed just now. And I would say that this category is a little bit tricky to describe since it entails all kinds of personal and household services and workers, as it refers to informality of contracts or non-existence of contracts. These services are usually performed by private sector workers who work without contracts or semi-formally, meaning that they officially either work shorter hours or they have weird contracts that doesn't really, they don't represent what they're really doing. They are paid cash on hand basis. And as was mentioned several times, in the Czech Republic, these people performing these kinds of activities are usually migrants from Ukraine, but also there is this big category of people who are labeled informal carers. Those are usually family members who work for free in their free time, as you clarified just before this question. So I think this would be the description of the sector in the Czech Republic. Then also the question, what type of workers in which services is more vulnerable is quite, in my opinion, there are different types of vulnerabilities experienced by workers in different subsectors. And as such, I don't really feel confident enough to evaluate which workers are in the most vulnerable position. Although, in my opinion, again, or according to the study, there is one position that is disadvantaged to most due to the fact that, among other things, even calling it profession, a word that implies working for money, is not accurate. And these are informal carers who are, as I was saying before, usually family members caring for another family member. They are working for free in their free times. They experience double burden. They don't have much of a support provided by the social system. And in Czechia, they provide 2/3 of social care in the country, and yet they remain almost unrecognized by the system. Other than that, maybe the only thing I can say is that, there are different types of vulnerabilities experienced in the whole of the sector. For example, precarious contracts, long working hours, in the private sector, low salaries, underfunding of providers, or undermined social status of workers in the public sector.
Sorry, thank you very much for coming to this topic of interaction between these informal caregivers and the formal part of the sector, which is again still undeclared from wide extent. And my next question goes to Estonia and to Jan, who in his report exactly highlighted this informality, which seems to prevail in the sector, and the important role is still played by family caregivers, which puts us a bit like far away from the regulation of the sector, because in terms of family caregivers, we hardly can talk about the unionization or the social dialogue, but still these two things are quite connected, because if I am as a family member cannot give the care, somebody else is coming to give the care. So so what is the influence and the size of the sector and working conditions in Estonia, and how this interacts with this informal care?
Many thanks to Monica for the question. That's important point indeed. Not because we said many times in the introduction already that informality, you see it everywhere, but especially in this sector. And while generally it's not a national specific, like Estonia is doing quite well in different shadow economic indicators, but in this sector it's indeed quite prevalent. like I think we said about the European Union, that the size of sector of PHS is maybe like 4% of employees, but in Estonia it is at least 2 times less, maybe 2%. On the other hand, it's about different parts of the sector, but you mentioned about family caregivers. So statistics also says that among adult population, about 15% take care of the family members. So it includes different things, different amounts of care, but in principle, it could be a huge potential for the growth of the sector. On the other hand, it's also not so simple how to do it, because not only Estonia, but different parts, different countries was emphasized that people also like to take care of the family members. And because it's family members, it's about whom you have certain expectations to the service. You don't want just anybody to take care of the service. And definitely that's a huge challenge for working conditions. On the other hand, when we did our interviews and surveys, it was a bit surprising. There were lots of positive stories as well, like people like to take care of the family members. They learn something about the family members they didn't know about it, or also but or other sub-project sectors. Some people, some service providers develop kindergarten or holding children. Those that look, I provide services to only one family, but they are relatively high income family. They give me a very good pay. They have very nice, friendly children. I have good pay. Okay, it's informal, it's very good. They also provide transportation to home, and everything is very good. But you see that this kind of positive cases, they can't be also generalized too much. There are huge risks if you are only dependent on only one customer and so on. Because naturally, there are big challenges to working conditions, and quite often we saw low pay and other issues. And regarding the biggest issue here, family care providers, very many of them are also very quite tired, exhausted, and which also means we later talk about social dialogue. But as has been also mentioned, it's kind of very tired, very exhausted people. It's very hard to tell also them that look, you have to organize, because you can't cope with your own problem. How you should organize. So what to do about it? We later talk more about social dialogue. Which was this Estonian 2023 care reform. It's a national story, but maybe also demonstrates this kind of wider issue of the sector, that our reform first only targeted residential care or nursing care and not really home care. But basically the next stage of reform really should target also about the home care and finance of home care. And because of the limited ability to pay has caused such informal situation. And regarding any other state measures, I think we already in introductory slide, it was mentioned about vouchers, and we also mentioned in our report maybe some kind of the preferential tax treatments and so on. But now always how you sell it to the state. You just can't ask money, but you should also show or could show that it's about also benefit for the state. If something that is informal is turned into formal, aside to solving other problems, it's also about raising tax revenue for the state. So that's how to communicate this solution for the state. So summing up, some national peculiarities, of course, but also issues that are relevant for all countries.
Yes, I see also this debate mostly as going from like very relevant issues that just spoken by different experts in different countries, or the issues are very similar. And I have a question. So we're coming to Slovakia, where Barbara in her report emphasized the issue of feminization of the work. And this is connected with both the informal work and the reason why we need more third parties in the household because it cannot be done only, or it's super demanding to be done only by the family members. But the new people coming to the household are again women. Yes, so the huge feminization of the sector is also an issue. So Barbara, please elaborate how this impacts the working conditions.
Yes, thank you very much, Monica, for this question. Really, because I also investigate on my research area, except of caring societies, is also gender equality. So actually, I see really very interconnection with all this phenomenon. So of course, we encountered in Slovakia really similar challenges as in other countries. We know that most home care workers, formal or informal, are women. You know, this is probably not the problem as such or per se, but the problem is that the entire sector is characterized by low wages, low social insecurity, and high level of informality. So this is something what is probably somehow interconnected to that the sector is really dominated by women. What we found, especially in Slovakia, that the link between the poor working condition in the PHS care sector and gender inequalities in household and labor market is really intense. Slovakia, probably a similar or more CEE countries, ranks low in the European Gender Equality Index, especially in the time domain, confirming that disproportionate burden of care is on women. So we have really a huge impact on the women in the labor market, formal labor market. Based on the data in this project, we found out that while the related policies do not sufficiently address the interconnection of care work and gender inequality in the labor market, domestic care workers, which we spoke to, indirectly articulate this link. So during one of the focus group, the formal home care described her work as follows. Can I ask for the quotation? Yes, so she said, we do everything like a housewife. What the client can't do, I do. It means cooking, cleaning, washing, ironing, dressing the client, washing her, helping her shop, and so on. We do everything. Sometimes I even had to such a problem that I was already repairing the toilet or driving out mice. You know, so actually we now see that actually it is really similar to what the women are doing at the regular or traditionally at the household. Even the job description in our Act on Social Services is very broad and very vaguely defined in terms of household services. It resembles really the under-evaluated, unpaid work traditionally performed by women in the household without any time limits, health and safety protection, or decent remuneration.
Yes, so thank you very much for pointing this out and to highlighting this feminization topic and the reason why we need to really level up the working conditions and the way considered to move forward is the coordination of the social is the coordination of the sector via social dialogue or at least a policy dialogue. So my last question goes to or last question of the first part of this panel, when we are still naming the problem and highlighting the most important issues for the sector, goes to North Macedonia, to Nikica. And North Macedonia is not an EU member country, and although while C countries were for quite a long considered the only standing countries, we are not right now highlighting the fact that they are receiving countries in terms of migrants, but also having its own PHS sector. And so looking in the case, and that's why we picked it in the project to have also non-EU member country or non-EU country, is the case of North Macedonia, which suffers, and it's highlighted in your report, from the care drain. So how does this impact the home care services in the country?
Indeed, Monica, thank you for this question. I would say that the phenomenon of care drain has a profound impact on the home care services in Macedonia. The intensified immigration of care workers leads to shortages of skilled labor in the sector, but also impacts negatively the quality of the services and certainly the availability of services. At the same time, what we are experiencing is large demographic changes, particularly aging population, which then means that the need or the demand for care services, especially for elderly, is actually increasing, whereas the supply is constrained. Here you would expect that the public sector would fill in the gap. Unfortunately, public care institutions, both for children but also for elderly, are operating at their full capacity, and there are long waiting lists, meaning that they cannot meet the demand of the population. So what happens is that families have to rely mainly on private sector care provision. However, this is prohibitively expensive, and they cannot afford the services. So in this gap between the supply and demand, what happens is that there is a growing informal sector or informal care workers. Unfortunately, the working conditions and the protection of workers in this sector is very low. Informal care workers do not have employment contracts. They are mainly engaged in precarious employment, and also they're not subject to any social protection. So this not only affects the workers in the sector, but it also certainly affects and compromises the quality and reliability of care services. So this is this dynamic, I would say, in the home care services is something new that is happening to Macedonia. Apparently, the other CE countries have already gone through these processes, and they present a big challenge to our policy makers. So within the project, we also, and within the interviews, focus group discussions, and so on, we were discussing and trying to address or to provide policy recommendations on how to tackle with these challenges in the home care services, which I will talk about later.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for this first round of insight into the topics related to social PHS sector. I see few questions in the chat, which yeah, I'm not sure. So I will take the two, or maybe we can leave it after the debate and continue with the debate, because I think I cannot really organize it such that I read and give a word to others. So maybe so in our debate until now, I see that the workers in the sector face several challenges related to institutional settings, financing the public sources, but also the feminization seems to be is like great topic, and the care drain, which is highlighted in Macedonia, but I think it was a huge question in Slovakia, and I think in the Polish case, so in other countries as well, quite a lot of people were migrating to West to do this kind of jobs. So for the workers in the sector, staying in these countries means low wages, uncertain or no contract, and unsafe work environments. So, but what we would like to address in this debate is not only to name the problems, but also to highlight the challenges and opportunities for social dialogue, as we frame it in the project. But maybe let's now see whether the social dialogue is the way for the sector, because of the lack of the actors. So my question goes back to Anna, to Polish case. So what opportunities for improvements in the sector we can find in Poland, and what were the difficulties to even find the stakeholders for your research?
Monica, thank you for your question. Indeed, when you find it troublesome to find the stakeholders and the social actors to discuss the social dialogue, this is the indicator that the social dialogue is non-existent basically on PHS in Poland. However, I would like to highlight a positive fact that we actually have a trade union, a newly established trade union that's dedicated to domestic workers, and that's the Domestic Workers Committee established in 2021, which is actually the workers of migrant background who decided to start up a trade union in Poland. And as much as I would refer to all these characteristics of PHS that you named in terms of other countries, like feminization, informal type of care provision, cane drain, I believe that this is a very positive fact that we may be very hopeful about for the future. Unfortunately, the trade union at the moment is not representative, but this is actually the task for the government to support the national dialogue. And I feel also that there is a hope to launch the dialogue when we discuss the institutionalization of care services, that this is actually the context by which we can introduce personal household services to be discussed nationally. In terms of the solutions, we have certain new solutions that were introduced in the past couple of months. So November last year, so-called neighborhood services. And very lately, we have active parent program. Both of these allow to contract service provision officially, which is a great solution in terms of tackling undeclared work and finding undeclared service provision in Poland. And in terms of the suggestions for the future, if I may just highlight two suggestions, given that there are other countries very eager to share their solutions. Definitely, we need a long-term care system that's integrated and takes into account all the specificities of informal and formal care provision in Poland in order to fight unregistered work. And second of all, definitely simplifying the rules of registering and contracting the services would help a lot and improve social security of the workers.
So from what you're saying, I think it's important first to recognize the sector as a sector and to aim to regulate or help to self-regulate from the part of the public authorities. Yeah. So the second question goes to Estonia, to Jan, about this issue of social dialogue, which takes place in healthcare sector, and which partially covers the home care workers, but not the others, as we mentioned. So, Estonia, it's quite small country, and the PHS sector is quite has quite fragmented actors. So, what are the ways forward or towards ideally collective bargaining in the sector?
Many thanks for the question. That's indeed very relevant, and as said, in such a case of very limited social dialogue, it's very much a question how to establish this organization in the first place. Now, it could be a problem for many CE countries, but usually say that maybe on the one hand, Slovenia is maybe relatively well organized, generally, not only PHS, but generally, and Baltic states are least organized here. And we already said about it, that it's a little bit kind of a question of a vicious circle. We think that social dialogue should be a solution. On the other hand, if you have very deep employees, workers in very difficult position, very exhausted, it's also very hard to tell them that, look, solve your problems, organize. So it's kind of a little bit a vicious circle. On the other hand, sectors, organizations outside of the sector also told us that they don't see this rule or mandate or reason to organize employees in the sector. So basically, it's kind of sometimes it's a message. It's a kind of nobody can't do it. The problem of a small country is indeed here how to achieve a critical mass. Like, for instance, very simple question that to have a working organization that can at least finance one full-time employee, you need a certain number of members paying membership fee. I think it was mentioned like at least 500 members or so, and that could be a challenge. On the other hand, that also interview stressed that people or companies participating in a trade union employers organization, they should have some common problem or some common agenda. So PH sector is very fragmented, but you can't just bring all these very different parts of the sector together, because care and non-care, they may have very different problems. That's important. Of course, to have a social dialogue, you need two sides: employers organize and workers organize. With employers, it seems to be it's a bit less of a problem. It may be a little bit it's not organized, but maybe it's a bit more interesting. It's one very clear reason that if you address your concerns or issues to the government or to the state, it's much easier to do it in an organized way. Because otherwise it seems you're kind of communicating your own private interests. But basically, if you're organized, it basically gives you much better legitimization, so to say, about your things. That it's not only your private concern, but it's really a problem of the full sector. Both employees. Naturally, one important development is we talked about informal employment, but natural professionalization is very important. That also actors, employees in the sector would see it as a long-term opportunity of working in the sector. And we had some examples were about collective bargaining. That basically there was successful collective bargaining. Employees achieved some good agreement about, I think it was wages or something else, and then they basically told that, look, we now received a good bargaining outcome. Why do we need to part of union? Why do we have to pay any more membership fee? Let's skip the union because we already kind of achieved what we wanted. So it's kind of a short-term attitude of free riding is really a problem. And so we should really need people to see, employees to see working in the sector as a long-term option, and that would address it. And as to other solutions, we also in the report, we kind of mapped some cases where there are basically working organizations, but these organizations do not really work as social dialogue actors or as trade unions, and maybe some professional organizations would maybe a little bit think about widening their scope. And also naturally one should also look on best practices, not only from other countries, but maybe within the same countries from other sectors. And we kind of showed cases where actually sector dominated by self-employed workers actually have organized and work quite well through the dialogue. So
Okay. Thank you. I think we need to speed up a bit, so please shorter answers for the next speakers. Thank you very much for this. So going to Slovenia, where the situation is quite different from Estonia in terms of we can find the stakeholders there, and there is some established collective bargaining around. So how does social dialogue in Slovenia looks like, and what are the opportunities for improvement, Branko? Briefly.
Thank you. Now, look, in Slovenia, social dialogue in terms of collective bargaining coverage and regulative capacity of the social partners follows quite the same pattern as working conditions. It appears relatively developed in the publicly provided PHS, that is, in care for the elderly and persons with disabilities. There is also some collective bargaining where PHS are privately provided on a formal market, such as in home cleaning, but their coverage is low. In principle, collective bargaining can improve working conditions, which could also alleviate the problem of labor shortages and improve, of course, the accessibility of PHS. However, both the capacity of the social partners to improve wages and working conditions, as well as the quality and affordability of service, hinges critically on the level and type of funding. As one of the trade union representatives shared in an interview, and I quote here, funding in social care is problematic anyway, she says. When the funds run out, the price of the service must be raised, which is an unpopular measure for every employer. And then it is better to squeeze the workers than to squeeze the users and risk some service cancellation and so on. Raising the price is the last measure used by the employer. Instead, they try to economize. This is the end of quote. Of course, they economize on workers. Now, this subordination of the collective bargaining to the financial straitjacket is most clearly visible in the area of personal assistance, which is publicly funded in Slovenia, although it is not provided by public sector organizations. However, this service used to be regulated by the public sector collective agreement. In the law referred to public sector collective agreement. Now, at the time of adoption of the law on personal assistance, that was a few years ago, there were only a few hundred users of this service, and the cost was estimated at a few millions euro per year. However, the number of users increased sharply, which caused a surge in costs. What happened then? Well, as soon as the cost increased beyond a certain level, the government has deliberately severed all the links with the public sector collective agreement in order to cut the cost. So collective bargaining is important for both working conditions and quality of service, which in turn have massive repercussions in the areas of both class and gender relations. However, if collective bargaining is really to make an impact, the service has to be funded appropriately.
Yeah, thank you for this very clear message and connection between the recognition of the care and the home care and the services in the PHS sector as a public good, and thus the public service which needs public attention. So going to Czechia and to Lenka, right now we see that in some countries we can find, at least in some subsectors, the collective bargaining. What is the case in Czechia, and what are the potentials for collective bargaining in PHS sector here?
Yes, thank you for the question again. The problem with the collective bargaining in PHS is that there are almost non-existent representative bodies or social partners, such as trade unions, that would primarily focus their agendas on PHS. There are different partners that slightly touch upon the issues faced by PHS, but it's not a priority in their agendas. And since the understanding of the dynamics in the sector presupposes understanding of workers' needs in the sector, this understanding is limited. And you know, it's not that Czechia as a country doesn't have the tradition of social dialogue practices such as collective bargaining, but in regards to PHS, workers remain unrepresented and hence their issues are omitted in collective bargainings. However, in regard to potential leveling up of social dialogue and collective bargaining in PHS sector, there is one specific subsector within which a strong social dialogue can be found, and it's the sector of social care, including then home social care. That is represented, for example, by newly formed trade union Alice, the trade union of employees in social services, and there are several social partners involved in social dialogue activities, which have facilitated positive developments in the whole of the sector. And this was also seen on their active participation in this project that showed an intense interest in the form of collaboration with us or with other social partners throughout the course of the PERHOUSE project. So I would say that if there is a potential for leveling up of collective bargaining and social dialogue activities in Czechia, it would be in the social care sector.
Yeah. Yeah, so similarly, Barbara, in your report in Slovakia, you highlighted that, okay, we do not observe social dialogue, but we observed involvement of actors, and we have an actors, and they are active and highlighting the topics of the, at least of the part of the PHS sector, for instance, in the care. So what about these different interactions of the stakeholders? Does it bring something for the workers in the PHS sector?
You're right, Monica, that when I was looking for any really distinct special social dialogue covering the whole PHS sector as is defined in this project, I didn't find any. But of course, we have multiplied trade unions who represent specific professions such as healthcare and social care workers who work as employees, and also a social partner representing social services providers is also operating in Slovakia. That is okay, that is wonderful. Unfortunately, PHS workers working as self-employed in care and non-care services such as cleaners and gardeners currently have no representation. However, considering a broader approach to social dialogue, we see several or many professional associations or non-governmental organizations engaged in vibrant networking, public discussion, projects and agreements, agreements. So for example, we have one professional association focusing specifically on carers, only on carers, both those working in Slovakia, but also abroad, either informal, even looking also on informal family care. So this is very unique because they are covering all the forms of care as such. They are not allowed to participate in official social dialogue so far or bargaining, but they intervene, for example, with similar tools, which is typical for civil or political dialogue. For example, they have to try to speak to stakeholders, to policymakers. They issue a press release about legislation shortcomings and so on. So they are very, very active. So I see that this could serve as an interim solution until social dialogue and collective bargaining is established in a complex PHS sector. So this might be also a way out.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting this. As we do not observe, social dialogue, but we still observe multi-actors and multi-stakeholders dialogue. So going back to Macedonia as our mirror country without EU membership, I quite often observe in the candidate countries the will to catch up. So sometimes it's the driving forces are a bit different than in the countries which are already in the European Union. So how do you observe the situation in North Macedonia in terms of the interaction of social partners or the interaction in wider scale of stakeholders?
Thank you, Monica. I would say that the role of the social dialogue in the PHS sector in Macedonia is crucial. However, it is highly unevenly developed between different segments of the sector. In the public sector, I would say that the social dialogue is happening between trade unions and employers, and it's very well organized, meaning that workers are unionized and that there are collective bargaining agreements, which provide high protection and security and relatively high quality of the jobs in the public sector, meaning higher wages, better security, better working conditions, and so on for the workers in the public sector, especially for the workers in the childcare and elderly care. However, on the other side, we have the private sector, where social dialogue is almost non-existent, meaning that workers are not unionized, that there are no collective bargaining agreements, and there is stretch, I would say, of workers, something that was mentioned in Slovenia, stretch of workers working in these sectors, trying to economize rather than to provide high quality of services in the sector, meaning that workers usually are engaged in precarious employment with irregular working hours, low social protection, and also very low job security. And on these two kind of dualities, say, in the sector, I would again add the informal workers, whose position is even worse because they don't have any written working contracts, meaning that they're not included at all in the social dialogue and not covered by any means of social protection. So from a policy perspective, I believe that tackling first the private sector or engaging the private sector in collective bargaining should be the first priority of the government, because we now have a new government which is these days entering into position, but also tackling the undeclared sector, and especially from the perspective of gender equality, something that was mentioned by Barbara, because this sector is still prevalently, there is female employment in the sector. So challenges are high, but I believe that through this project, we've seen some good experiences in the chats. There are also good experiences from other countries, especially France and Italy. So I think we can learn a lot and improve the position of workers in the sector.
Perfect. Thank you very much for all these insights. And right now I should open the floor, or at least ask for questions from our audience, because I see in the chat that there is quite a lot of comments in the sector, which I'm not sure how to pick the most important. Or is there anybody in the audience who want to speak loud, so we can have it firstly the questions which are spoken, and then I can read those in the chat. Okay, I see no hands raised, so let me read the first question, which is from Mr. Iveta Zdilova, who point out that the safety and health protection issue is the topic for from her point of view. There is in Slovakia a specific group of workers employed by municipalities who provide home-based care services, mobile services, especially home caregiving. From that point of view, they are entering households as employees, but the working conditions at households cannot be settled by employer and often is not safe. In order to protect the health and safe environment for carers and caree, there should be easy steps to be taken by family. Is there anything like that? It could be helpful, so a family could apply for grant from government to set up such protective environment. I think so. This is the issue for the PHS sector, and I think allowed another question from Mr. Kosh, again from Slovakia. And I think he's pointing out about the migrants from Ukraine who works undeclared because they cannot find a job in the regular labor market, which is also a big issue why the PHS sector should be regulated, and we should pay attention for undeclared work in this sector, because the vulnerabilities, especially when it comes to migrant workers, are quite high. Yeah, and there was the question for Anna about the Polish Association of PHS Workers. So maybe this week we can also mention in the chat. Yeah, there was also one more comment from Czechia about the social dialogue in social care, which which highlights that maybe there was not enough discussion also between the researchers and the stakeholders, which it's something we should address and discuss. And the case that also the Czechia has also informal care, or this care is not very well regulated and has a lot of problems. So is there anything you would like to react from the current panel, at least briefly, so we can then move on to the second panel we have? Barbara, please.
Thank you for the comments from Mrs. Zdilova. You know, when we spoke to home carers, because we have two focus groups with the home carers, and they really confirmed, yes, the situation sometimes in the household is horrible. It is dangerous, not even for them, but also for the carers. And to be honest, I don't know any financial mechanisms that would somehow really to allow enhance the safety in the households. Of course, usually these are families which are really in a low income situation. They can't afford any amendments. I hope that somebody, or we can include this suggestion in our report, really to address this, because I know that this is really a problem. And in terms of the migrant workers from Ukraine, we know about them. We know that they have really special barriers to really to be included in a official or formal care sector. To be honest, I know that there have been some attempts that, for example, we have this lack of carers in the residential elderly or senior cares. We really want to include the new carers in the sector. I don't know currently what might be all the legal barriers that are preventing to include these women, usually with children, who are now currently in our country. So yes, but I know we know about them. I know that the ministry or some other organizations have been trying to monitor these people, how they are doing, how they are integrated, and what is actually going on in terms of inclusion of Ukrainian refugees in our country. So yes, thank you for the question. Yes, thank you.
Also, Branko would like to comment about the health and safety issue in the household services.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if I understood the question properly, but if I understand, the question was about the mechanism to ensure health and safety at the workplace, especially in home place, or home care, or home help, we call it, or something like that. That is organized by municipalities also here in Slovenia. But one of the mechanisms, this is financial mechanisms. I thought that it was similar to other countries, but maybe it is not. It is that before the service is provided, it is mandatory for the household that is a care receiver to acquire themselves the special equipment, that is the kind of a hospital bed and other stuff. And this is the condition, but this provision is by default financed by the health insurance. So that I think this is one of the practices, and these are very important, I think, elements of the health, healthy and safe work environment.
Yes. Okay. So for now, thank you very much for this comment. And I see also in the chat starting a bit more live discussion, which we can continue. And I saw Anna was responding directly to the question about the stakeholder in Poland. But right now we should move on to the next panel, which will be moderated and chaired by Thomas Bigel, Secretary General of EASPD. And so I'm giving the floor him. But please continue the discussion even in the chat, and thank you very much for these inputs in this panel.
Thank you very much, Monica, and all the speakers for a very, I think, in-depth and interesting discussion about what's happening at national level around Europe. This section will then look a little bit more at what's happening at European level. So what is the European Union doing or not doing to support the different, let's say, subsectors within PHS? What are they doing to support domestic workers? What are they doing to support people with disabilities who recruit home care workers, etc., etc.? So we're looking at European Union action. We have 5 speakers today. One, Grace, unfortunately, who represents IFAD, can only join online. We have Aude Boisseau from IFE, representing family employment. We have Aurélie Decker from FC, representing the European Federation of Services to Individuals. We have Marc Bergfeld from Uni Europa, a trade union very active, not only but also in domestic work and care and so forth. And then we have Sylvain Renouvel, who is director of the Federation of European Social Employers. So put together, it's a major part of all the major networks involved in PHS at European level. First, we'll do a first round of, let's say, questions for each of the speakers, and then we will open it up. So if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box, and then I will try and make sure to ask them after the first round of questions. So again, any questions, put them in the chat box, please. First with Grace Papa from EFAT. EFAT works significantly on the issue of domestic workers. We've heard how important that is to Personal Household Services. She can only provide a video, unfortunately, but Grace, what's on the agenda of the EU regarding domestic work? Grace, the floor is yours. Dimitri, if you can share the video, please.
Good morning, everybody. I am Grace Papa, and I am the political secretary of EFAT in charge of the domestic work sector. And today I wanted to address an issue that is both urgent and deeply significant, which is the condition of domestic workers in the EU. Domestic workers are the backbone of our households, ensuring our homes are clean, our meals are prepared, and our loved ones are taken care of. They are essential to our well-being and enable us to maintain a healthy work-life balance. Yet, despite their crucial role, many domestic workers in Europe remain unrecognized and lack access to fundamental workers' rights. EFAT has set forth 3 key proposals for action to address their challenges and enhance the conditions of domestic workers in Europe. The first one is extending the scope of Directive on Health and Safety. The European Framework Directive on Safety and Health at Work is a cornerstone of improving working conditions across Europe. However, it currently excludes domestic servants from its scope. This exclusion means that domestic workers are not protected by crucial occupational safety and health legislation. They are regularly exposed to harmful chemicals, ergonomic challenges, and psychosocial risks. And by extending the scope of this directive to include domestic servants, we can ensure they have the right to a safe and healthy working environment. The second demand is ratification and implementation of ILO Convention 189 on domestic workers. ILO Convention 189 is a landmark treaty that sets a global legal framework for the recognition and protection of domestic workers. It extends basic labor rights, including freedom of association, collective bargaining, and a safe and healthy work environment. Unfortunately, only 9 EU member states have ratified this convention, and none have fully implemented its principles. The EU must do more to promote the ratification and implementation of ILO Convention 189 to ensure domestic workers are granted decent working and living conditions. Our third demand is promoting EU social dialogue in the PHS sectors. Social dialogue is essential for improving working conditions and fostering professionalization in any sector. In 2022, EFAT, along with Uni Europa, EFSI, and EFE, committed to increasing recognition for the PHS sectors by mutually recognizing each other as sectoral social partners at the EU level. This strong cooperation aims to address common challenges, improve occupational health and safety, address undeclared work, regularize and professionalize the workforce. The European Commission has granted us funds for a 2-year joint project to strengthen social dialogue and collective bargaining at both the EU and national levels. Thanks to this joint project, we have been able to develop the 2024 PHS Employment Monitor. This employment monitor collected a total of 6,523 survey responses from over 4,000 workers over 2,000 service users and users employers, and 157 companies and other organizations in the PHS sectors across Europe, making it the largest ever European survey of the PHS sectors. And our goal is to represent PHS workers and employers in the EU and to foster national representation and dialogue. With these three proposals, EFAT aims not only to improve working conditions, but also to recognize the invaluable contribution of domestic workers to our society. By extending health and safety protections, promoting international labor standards, and fostering social dialogue, we can ensure that domestic workers receive the dignity and respect they all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. Three very practical ways to make sure that Europe supports better domestic workers across Europe. So the first is extending the Health and Safety Directive. The second is making sure the EU and the member states ratify the ILO Convention 189. And the third is making sure that the different sectors in PHS have a voice in European social dialogue too. Sometimes we think that the EU, is too far away from some of these local issues, but here we see three very practical measures that the EU can do, and that will have an impact on PHS around Europe. We will come back to some of these points afterwards, but thank you, Grace, for sending that video. Now let's move on to Aude Boisseuil. So you represent, well, you can present if yourself maybe briefly, but quality is always a challenge when it comes to PHS and in quite an unregulated sector. At least parts of it is sometimes unregulated. How can we ensure that when care or other services are being provided in people's homes, how can we make sure that there are safeguards for workers, safeguards for families, safeguards for the employers? How can we make sure that they are of quality? Do you have any ideas of also what the EU can do in the next steps to tackle this? Thank you, Aude.
Thank you, Thomas. I cannot agree more to what Grace just said, so I won't come back on the need of the EU to foster the ratification of the ILO Convention 189, because of course that's a way to make sure that member states are implementing it and to improve quality. I think the EU should also foster the creation of legal framework for PHS, because it should take into account all kind of model of employment, also declarative mechanism, social and fiscal incentive, and access to training and social protection for workers. As you mentioned, well, actually you didn't mention, but FA represents families in the need of care that are directly hiring domestic and care workers, PHS workers, and our members are professionalization organization of PHS or social protection institutes. We have also a child minor organization and employers organization signing the collective agreement on the direct employment model. And basically, in this aspect, this very peculiar aspect, the main problem we have is that there's only 2 collective agreements in Europe on this direct employment model. And so basically, it suffers from a lot of undeclared work because families most of the time are not organized. There's no organization representative of families being employers. And that's a way to tackle undeclared work and improve quality. And that's why we decided to be part of the PHS Dialogue project Grace was mentioning, to help national stakeholders to structure themselves, to organize themselves, because today there's not a lot of organization representative of families being employers. So this PHS employment monitor was important because it recognized that there was really users, employers, so employing PHS workers. 1,800 user employees were surveyed, and the main, around half of them said that they were not represented, but they would benefit from a social dialogue representation. So yeah, I think that's a very important aspect. And you also asked me about the ongoing initiative, and how it opens space for progress. You maybe have heard about the Single Permit Directive within the Pact for Asylum and Migration. Yeah, for the first time, it recognized the right for workers to change employers. And in the aspect of PHS work, it's very important because it's very important for us that the work permit is not attached to one employer in case of conflict, in case it doesn't go well. So that's the first start because around half of the workforce is migrants. So it's very important, this aspect. So the right to change employer is introduced for the first time, but there's nothing specific on PHS. And also regarding to the implementation, it's up to member states to decide how they want to do it and how they want to. So we are expecting more clarity about it, and we will follow it carefully because it will have a real impact. And this morning was mentioned also the European Care Strategy. I think you may know that there will be the national reports that will hopefully be published very soon. In any case, all member states were supposed to provide national reports on how they will implement the European Care Strategy, whether it's on long-term care or in childcare. By the way, there's a real segmentation about what's a component of the PHS sector. So we truly hope that the national report will include measures on PHS, because for now we have been a little bit disappointed about how long-term care, home care was included, and basically childcare at home also. It was mostly excluded from the text. And yeah, I think I covered it all.
Thank you very much, Aude. I started three main elements from what you said. The first is, again, strengthening social dialogue, of course, at European level, but also at national level, including in terms of family employment, because that can play a major role in tackling, not only, but in particular tackling undeclared work in home care or domestic work and those type of activities. The second actually is something that I didn't know about, so it's very interesting, is, if I understand correctly, it's around the Pact for Asylum and Migration, which enables a right to change employer, which of course some people sometimes get stuck when they enter into a country that they can't change their employer, and that's of course a huge discrimination against their employment rights, that they have different opportunities to others in Europe, and that's something to change. So we will continue to look into that. And the third element is around the European Care Strategy. Of course, there's a cross-European, let's say, communication. But most of the European Care Strategy is in fact about national reports and national reforms that are being done in place, and they will be published soon. Hopefully they will be published. We're pushing for them to be made public, and it'd be interesting to see to which extent PHS or the different elements of PHS are really tackled in these reports. So thank you, Aude, for that. I might come back to you later with a question or two. Next up on the agenda is Aurélie Decker from the European Federation of Services to Individuals. We talked, the previous panel talked a lot about funding related issues. Of course, it's very complex when it comes to PHS because there's a lot of different dimensions to it. But what are your views on how to strengthen the funding of PHS services? Aurélie.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. So maybe I will start by shortly introducing FC. So FC is the European Federation for Services to Individuals. So we gather together national trade association and employers organization active in the so-called PHS sector, also termed domestic and home care services. So basically, all members are active in different kind of provision of services in the home of people, be it 3 hours per day to living care, but also mostly care services, so care related to the person, direct care services, but also indirect care, such as cleaning or cooking or gardening, etc. So yes, indeed, there is this question of financing. It has been mentioned on several occasions this morning. I think the survey, the result of the survey that were shown at the beginning, identify the question of affordability as one of the reasons of not accessing PHS services, or not as much as needed. And in fact, in our memorandum to the newly elected MEPs, so we called on the new EU decision makers to commit to reduce by 50% the numbers of persons which cannot have access to PHS for financial reasons by 2030. Currently, we estimate that there are 35.7% of EU population that cannot access PHS due to financial reasons. And how could we do it? So we see there are several opportunities at EU level. The first one is strengthening or improving the monitoring of employment and social challenges in member states as it is considered in the social convergence framework. We also consider that we should go a step further in revising and loosening the EU fiscal rules, which constrain quite a lot member states' budget policies in order to adjust them to the social needs. And on that particular aspect, just to give you a bit more information, going deeper into the European semester process. You might not all be familiar with it, but it's the primary fiscal-based guidance from the European Commission. It directs the implementation of leading EU policies or the management of EU funding, including policy initiatives such as the European Care Strategy. And although the European semester process acknowledged the needs for improvement in long-term care systems, we consider that the recommendation remains vague and they lack in specificity. So, for example, in the country reports, the country-specific recommendation, they do highlight the need for member states to address key needs in PHS, but not specifically enough. And that's why we have been calling for a more ambitious approach and a prioritization of the PHS agenda through the European semester process. So, for example, we call on the European Commission to adopt a cohesive approach to align recommendation in the CSR international reports with the European Care Strategy, and in that regards to comprehensively address home-based care and PHS services. We call for some prioritization of social inclusion, of the need to design long-term care strategies. Member states should be capable of anticipating and mitigating future challenges. We also call for enhancing the social dimension of the EU economic governance review, of the adoption of a transversal approach. We need to have some recognition or better recognition of the interdependence of economic, social, environmental, and health issue in the European semesters. And we also call for implementing measures that improve the adequacy of care while preserving fiscal sustainability. And by that, we mean that it is really needed at European level that we acknowledge the earn back effects of any policy supporting the sectors. And we mentioned them, but they are key and in reducing and declared work, for example, increasing service quality and improving working condition. We know, for example, that each euro spent on long-term care services is associated with national added value of 1.7 euros. And on top of that, we can add 0.7 euros in tax and social contribution. So it's very key that the European Commission take that into account and provide specific technical support to member states so that they can better assess the budgetary impact of their supporting policies to PHS and design them accordingly. And we believe that the technical support instrument is a unique instrument at EU level, which has the capacity to deliver demand-driven and tailor-made expertise to member states in addressing both their national and EU political priorities. And finally, just to wrap up, I would say, we are also, we welcome the important work that has been done by both the Spanish and Belgian presidency on promoting social investment. The joint meeting, joint ECOFIN and EBSCO meeting in March was key. It paves the way towards common guidelines on monitoring and evaluating social investment returns. And so we are really hoping that all this work will, provide opportunities that will be concretely translated in better integration of those social investments policy into the European semester process.
Thank you very much, Aurélie. Again, very clear, bringing in sometimes some quite often seen as opaque European policies, such as the European semester, which is a strange name. I agree. It's a dialogue between the Commission and member states on coordinating economic and social policy. It was started 15 years ago, around after the financial crisis of 2008. And at the start, it was very much about fiscal policy, but not only. But now they're going very much more into the depth of some social policy areas, such as, for example, care strategy, such as domestic work, such as these things. But one challenge that it has is that it doesn't really, it's often very vague in terms of the recommendations that the Commission can make to member states. And that leaves a lot of space, maybe too much space, to member states to sort of do what they want with it and actually not really make any challenges. So that's also, I think, work for us to bring additional precision to the Commission, so that they really know what they should recommend to member states and where there can really be a difference. And another element that's, I think, also very important is the EU budget. And I already mentioned the technical support instrument. So this is an EU budget that's basically EU program that can support member states in making different reforms. And so, for example, if a member state wants to make a reform around PHS or domestic work or voucher systems, for example, they can use this system to get advice and recommendations on how they can do that reform. And that's proved to be very effective in the past. Of course, there are many other elements to the EU budget. Thank you, Aurélie. Now let's go, let's say, from the employer's side back to the worker side, the training side. Mark, welcome. You represent Uni Europa. Maybe first you can present a bit Uni Europa. And then secondly, it was mentioned a lot earlier in the previous sections. Gender is a very big element to PHS, and actually the lack of political prioritization given to PHS has a major impact on women in Europe today. Can you just tell us a little bit about what the EU can do to really tackle this and really make a difference on PHS, in particular from the gender element, Mark?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for the invitation, and thank you to the Research Consortium and Project Consortium for all their hard work on this subject, and particularly shedding a light on Central and Eastern Europe and Southeast Europe. As you know, I've spent many years trying to organize unions there and continue to do so. So I'm very happy that we have this report, and some of it is definitely going to feed into our work going forward. In terms of Uni Europa, we primarily represent workers in private non-profit, private for-profit care sector, both residential as well as home care. The European Commission considers us representative to negotiate at the EU levels for residential, hospitals, human health, and all other sectors that regarded. And we're present in numerous sectoral social dialogues at the EU level. And beyond that, as I just mentioned, one of our focuses really is in trying to develop new unions and orient older unions and more traditional unions based in male-dominated sectors to also organize in feminized and sectors in the services economy. And that being said, I think that's precisely where we see major challenges in the personal household services sectors. We know 95% of all personnel are women. And we see that often, as the PHS monitor has also described, those jobs are not sustainable jobs for the persons conducting the jobs at the moment. So most respondents in the PHS Employment Monitor said that they're not able to do this job until retirement. And what we see continuously, on the other hand, is those users of PHS services, this type of work enables them to participate in the labor market at the same time. And so we need to think, okay, like how do we turn some of these jobs, particularly for women, and feminized jobs, how do we turn them into breadwinning jobs? Because it's not simply enough to designate policies that effectively think like, okay, this is like the second job in the family. And I think this is a wider issue that we have within the European Union. When we talk about industrial policy, there's big discussions, that stretch all the way down to the national level. And, we have a lot of public discourse about reindustrializing Europe, about artificial intelligence. But when it comes about providing like decent work to women workers who make the economies run on a day-to-day basis and who are the kind of foundation of like our economies, well, there's no public discussion on it. I'm like, that's just the way, it is. So I think that the PHS sector kind of is a focal point for all those issues that affect women workers, both on the user end as well as on the workers end, where they come together, and it illuminates and it really illuminates it. So I think that on that basis, there's like two leverage point I think that social partners have, that in this coming legislative period, where we really can start to make inroads. I think one is very clear on violence and harassment. Like all the data points towards like PHS workers facing violence and harassment, not only on the job, but as well as on the way to work, etc., and away from work. And ILO Convention 190 is very clear about violence and harassment on the job. And I think together with our efforts in order to get more member states to ratify and implement ILO Convention 189, I think also focusing on C190, which do a tremendous job. I think the other issue is that we've had the EU, what's it called, the Pay Transparency Directive, I think it was, right? If I remember the name correctly, and it stipulates that like equal pay for work of equal value. And I think that's something that particularly we need to like go back to time and time again, because what we see is we see within the health and care sector, etc., we see stratification between different groups of workers, despite them often doing the same job. We really need to pay attention to that, because whether you're caring for a person with disabilities in a household, or whether you're doing that in a kind of like a daycare kind of settings, it is actually work of equal value. So why do we have like differences in pay between these workers? Or whether you're taking care of an older person within a hospital setting or within a residential care setting, we again see pay differentials playing out. I'm not advocating for a race to the bottom. I think we should raise all boats. And I think I think the Pay Transparency Directive gives us a very strong wording and a good tool between the different jobs within the healthcare sector, but as well health and care sector, right? As well as between our sectors that we all represent, as well as other sectors in the economy where we see that where men dominate the industry, they are higher paid and higher remunerated. So I think we can use that. As a tool. And I think those are some of the issues I think we can continue to work on.
Thank you very much, Mark. I might come back to you later afterwards to hear a little bit about what you do as a European and international trade union around improving collective bargaining in the sector. That might be very practical examples, might be quite interesting too. So I hope that's okay. So of course, collective bargaining is important Not just the ILO Convention on Domestic Work is important, but also linking it to others, including on violence and harassment. As you know, that's a major issue, in particular around, let's say, informal areas, but not only, of course. And the last point is around pay. We all know that there are major issues in pay in care work as a whole, but we also know that in healthcare, for example, nurses get paid more in healthcare than they do in institutional care, than they do then in home care. And that's something that we need to look into because ultimately it's a very similar job with similar responsibilities, if not more responsibilities sometimes. Thank you, Mark. Now, last but not least, I will pass the floor to Sylvain Ronouvel from the Federation of European Social Employers. The European Commission have recently agreed to setting up a European Social Dialogue Committee for Social Services. We know that PHS has a lot of, let's say, social services. Care services is a big part of it. Can you tell us a little bit about this committee, what it does, how it relates to personal household services, and maybe how to improve collaboration with the other stakeholders here who are also active in social dialogue within PHS more broadly? So Sylvain, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. Indeed, we had the creation of a social dialogue committee 1 year ago, but I must say it has been a long process to get to this decision. It took something like 10 years on 4 projects to map and to build the capacity of the actors across the EU. And it must be said that you, Thomas, played a big role on behalf of the SPD in this creation and the process of the creation of the Federation and the Social Dialogue Committee. I must say, maybe to testimony a bit about all of this, about the process, it has been very difficult for a question of recognition. There was a prejudice. The Commission considered that 6-7 years ago that our sector was made of local authorities, was managed by local authorities. So it took a long time to convince them that no, yes, it is the case in many Nordic countries, but not in all Europe. So it has to fight against this prejudice because at this point they were telling us you should join the municipalities and regions organization. And it was thanks to Eurofound that made a representativeness study that it was recognized our sector was different than the local authorities. And then we had the recognition between the lines that a sector with almost 10 million workers needed a representation that it didn't have at this point. To define a bit the scope of this committee, so it's now almost 10 million workers. It's workers who provide services to children, children protection, persons with disabilities, elderly, and also all the vulnerable groups. And it is classified in 2 NACE codes, 87 and 88. It's residential care and social care without accommodation, where we can think we have overlaps with VPHS, of course. In terms of representative organization, we have on the employer side, social employers plus the municipalities and regions, which play also a role there because they provide some services, not the majority, but some of them. And on trade union side, we have EPSU and also CESI and UNI that is represented by Mark we just heard. But it's interesting because all the morning I heard the concerns we talk about every day. We have almost the same problems with low salaries, improving working conditions to be improved and so on. Maybe the only difference is that for us, undeclared work is not the top priority. It can exist, but as we represent more structured organizations, it's less present. But for the rest, we face the same challenges. The question, and mainly what we put on the top of the agenda, is the retention and recruitment issue. We have to improve them because we face staff shortages, and at the end, that's the service user who face the problem with non-available or long waiting list services. And we also, that's something also interesting for the PHS, is that we work on capacity building because I would say in Western part of Europe and Nordic part of Europe, we have a social dialogue in social services where it doesn't exist, and we don't even have representatives in Eastern and Southern Europe. So that's a key concern for us to learn from the others. And I must say, it's not only organizations from Greece visiting the Netherlands to see how they function, but it's also interesting for all the stakeholders. Even the big organizations appreciate to visit the others to learn from them, because the approach are different, initiatives are different. So it's very important and interesting. And so that's it for our activities. So we just starting. We had the first social dialogue committee in December, and we intend to have a framework of actions on recruitment and retention at the committee in November. You ask also the question about how we can improve collaboration between PHS sector and social services sector. But at EU level, it's quite easy. We already do it. Aurélie, Aude, and myself meet very regularly, I would say almost every month, to update ourselves about the policy issues and also our activities. But I must say, most of the work to be done is to be done at national level. And I think there are common points with the social services. Is that the fact we lack visibility, we lack representation in many countries. And for this, creating a social dialogue at national level can help a lot, because social partners have a special place in every member state. In some countries more than some others, but it is recognized at least by the Commission, because the Commission knows that if you have a social dialogue, you have better working conditions and better services in the end, so it is supported. But today, the organization or even NGOs or stakeholders have to stop thinking in silos and to gather in order to be visible, because that's the point. If you don't, especially in countries with not a huge population, it's difficult to create organizations, to have budget to create them. So I think it's important to work together at national level to make the sectors more visible and more represented.
Thank you.
And voilà, that's it. That was my conclusions. And the idea is to avoid the silos we were mentioning just before. We must work together to improve representation of our sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvain. I think some very clear messages there. On the one hand, learning from your experience within getting a sectoral committee for social services, it required a lot of pedagogy, raising capacity, also on the side of the European Commission to understand the sector, and that's also needed at PHS level clearly too. And then one, I think, major probably challenge for the PHS sector in terms of social dialogue is that the EU expects representativeness, but how can you be representative when there's a sector which is so, in some ways, so under formalized in some ways? So it's a bit of the chicken and the egg situation. You want to improve social dialogue committee, you need maybe a sectoral committee to do that. But on the other hand, they expect representation, and that's a challenge, I think. So hopefully they can continue to support the PHS partners and you also, Sylvain, to strengthen, capacity building of social dialogue structures at national level. And I know that everyone around the table here is committed to that. We don't have any times for questions, I'm afraid. So I will pass directly the floor to Barbara Holubova for the concluding remarks. Barbara, the floor is yours, and thank you also to the speakers here today for staying on time as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all. I was really surprised that so many questions, comments in the chat occurred. Unfortunately, we can't respond to them, but I will ask the organizer really to download all the questions, and I will, together with my partners, we'll try to respond to them directly to all the participants. So first of all, I would really like to thanks to all the partners in this project, because it was so intense work. I believe it was so many surveys, so many reports, so many leaflets. So everything will be published in a short time, I hope, on our website. We will finish the project. Of course, we will also suggest the lessons learned and the follow-up activities that would be recommended to European Commission, but also to our national stakeholders, what could be done. And in terms of, it was already mentioned at the beginning that we know more about the Western countries, how they manage to organize or to increase the social dialogue or working conditions in this sector. And of course, we can learn from this. What is a good practice, what works and what not, but also, for example, some lessons learned, what we should not do. But for example, I'm speaking about the live-in care PHS, because this is a huge issue also in Slovakia, because we have experiences for Slovak carers working in a live-in care in Austria and Germany, and we know actually how this might be a very dangerous and precarious working conditions. So, of course, I have many comments. I would like really to include to speak about all, but probably the last comment. I also very much rely on the complementary directives, which are probably not directly focusing on PHS or care sector, but also, as mentioned by Mark, on the gender pay transparency directive. Also, for example, the directive on minimum wage, because we have this article about the collective bargaining in all the sectors. And we also rely that these are somehow policies that could be referenced to, and we really try to organize or to suggest activities also at the national level to come forward also in this sector. So I really thank you to all. We will also disseminate the evaluation questionnaire. Please fill in all the comments you can also have some critical comments on it. We are really glad for all the feedback we will receive, and we will really try to learn from this. And I hope that the discussion will carry on. This is probably not the last project in this sector, and really thank you very much to all, and have a nice day.